Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Finally, today is the day with the 2.4 firmware update for the Panasonic LUMIX G9, and I'm testing it out in the same place as I've tested all of my previous, firmware updates for this camera. Well, basically it was just the one, and this was the one before this. So I'm testing out the 2.4 autofocus basically update, and I'm going to use the Leica 12 to 60mm f2.8 lens. I'm going to do kind of the same thing, walking back and forth, and see just how it works, with the face tracking and with the near and far distant autofocusing. This, by the way, is filmed on the Laowa 7.5mm f2 lens, manually focusing. So basically, yeah, it doesn't autofocus. I'm safe. So I'm going to start off with a full HD 25 frames per second shot at 1/50th of a second shutter speed. This time I'm shooting this at f2.8, basically at 12mm, but if I switch this to 25 and adjust my exposure a little bit, and the filters are a necessary thing, so basically like this. Now, this is now f3.5, the same focal length and the same aperture as I had the last time, and I'm just gonna walk back and forth and see how this works. So this is like the closest shot. I'm mostly interested, of course, in the background and in how fast the camera tracks my face as, I move around. So this is kind of a typical presenting thing, and if you have nobody behind the camera, this is what you would use. Yeah, I hope it's a little bit better, because I'm really hoping for Full HD and 4K 25 frames per second to be improved. Now, I never shoot at 50 frames per second. This is the 4K 25 frames per second, 1/50th of a second shutter speed, 3.5 aperture on the Leica 12 to 60mm. I'm just going to, back and forth walk. Last time this one was a little bit better because the resolution also affects as to how the depth from the focusing contrast-based autofocus works. So hopefully there shouldn't be any big difference between the one before and this one. Okay, this is shot at Full HD 50 frames per second with 1/100th of a second shutter speed. It's a little bit brighter because my ND filter just doesn't cope with having 1/100th of a second shutter speed. And if I turn it all the way down to one stop or two stop reduction, I'm actually not getting enough light because it's it's sundown. It's the golden hour. So this is how it looks. Full HD 50 frames per second. This one was a lot better compared to both of those before. So the Full HD 25 and the 4K 25. So hopefully, I'm again mostly interested in the background and how this is performing, how this is pulsing in and out. I think the pulsing is going to stay because it's still depth from the focus, contrast-based autofocus. But the tracking, as I look on the little teeny tiny monitor, which now has a red square telling me that I'm actually recording my video, looks kind of interesting. Back and forth. Okay, this is like the closest I can get. Nice. And this is now the 4K 50 frames per second shot at 8-bit 420 instead of the 10-bit 422, because the Lumix G9 still doesn't record 422 to 10-bit at 4K 50 frames per second. It only records that on an external recorder, which you have to buy, like the Atmos Ninja 5 or something like that. But this, from the last video, I thought it kind of looked okay. It was 8-bit on Vlog-L. Vlog-L kind of requires the 10-bit. Pay attention to the background. Is it pulsing or not? I don't know. But I'm gonna move back and forth as I talk. I'm also using the Rode the Rode NTG mic. It's not the Rode wireless microphone. This way the sound is a little bit different. But yeah, this was the best performing autofocus before the update, and I'm guessing it's still going to be the best performing autofocus after the update, because it's still contrast-based depth from defocusing autofocus. Now there is one more thing I wanna try. This now is the 4K 50 frames per second, but shot at 1/50th of a second shutter speed. This way, if I play this back on a 25 frames per second timeline, basically throwing away every other frame, I'm getting, the cinematic motion blur, the one that I was missing before when I was shooting 4K 50 with 1/100th of a second shutter speed, and playing that back on a 25 frames per second timeline without slowing down. So if you slow everything down, of course, the shutter speed slows down just as well, the equivalent shutter speed. But if you're not slowing it down, then the cinematic shutter speed is still 1/50th of a second. So basically, it should look good. The way I see it on the monitor, it's really smooth now. On the playback in the video, it's going to look the same always. It's 25 frames per second output, but there should be motion blur. So back and forth. Now I'm kind of hoping that this works really well, that if the autofocus with this setting works like awesome, I'm probably going to use this, 50 frames per second, 4K, 1/50th of a second shutter speed, and well, I'm gonna have to settle with 8-bit. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Does it look okay? Or the colors green and red, you know, like green right here and red. Anyway. Okay, this is like the closest point. Background pulsing. Now, I'm really interested at how the tracking works. Now, I haven't reviewed this before, so I have no idea how this works. Now I'm also going to try the vlogging kind of scenario where you have your camera in your hand with the Leica 12-60 shot at 12 millimeters, and this is kind of 24 millimeters full frame equivalent. This is shot at f2.8, 1/50th of a second shutter speed, 4K. This is what I would typically use for my vlogging. Now I always use the Laowa 7.5 millimeter for shots like this because I think it's just a little bit too tight. But I have trouble because the camera, if I use autofocus, not manual, like with the Laowa, the camera just loses me, especially if I look away, and then if I look back in, you know, it just kind of gets, you know, it just starts to hunt for focus. So basically I think this could be a little bit better. This is going to be, for me, I think the ultimate test, because this is the one scenario where I was really pissed off at the autofocus, you know. And this is kind of, I mean, you can solve this by just flipping it to manual focus. Now it's always going to be in focus because the focus plane is right over here. You know, if I go closer, it's not in focus. If I go further away, show you the distance, no, it's not going to be in focus, but this plane is always in focus. So this is kind of the safe zone using manual focus. But if I go to autofocus and press the joystick in on the Lumix G9 to lock myself, then it should work, you know. This firmware update should definitely solve the issue. This is like the only issue that everybody has with the Panasonic camera. Yeah. Now, I've only been ever talking about the video autofocus on the Lumix G9, never of the photography autofocus. And Panasonic has probably one of the best photography autofocuses that you can buy because it's very accurate. It's very up to date, basically. You know, even the Canons and the Sonys with their phase detect, or you know, when it comes to photography, this thing shoots 20 frames per second in burst photography, which was a rival to any sort of Canon and Sony like a couple of months ago before they released the R5 and the Alpha 1 right now. So basically for photography, the autofocus has been fine all the way. I never had any trouble with this with continuous autofocus, but with video, you know, it was an issue. So hopefully this thing kind of solves this thing a little bit more. So for my videos and for vlogging, I think I will still stick with the Laowa 7.5mm manual lens, just because it's a wider angle lens and I don't have an autofocus lens which is this wide, and I really enjoy using this one. So yeah, that's basically it. I hope you guys saw something. I hope you guys saw the difference between the videos before and this video with the firmware update 2.4. Please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button as always, and give me a comment, you know, just say hello or anything. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.